memory that I have of that particular time was feeling deeply dissatisfied with the fact that I didn't have meaning in my work. And I remember phoning my sister in Australia and saying to her, Donnie, I just don't feel like I'm getting meaning in what I'm doing. And she said to me, Lancy, you don't find meaning in your work. Meaning comes from family and community and all those things. Work is just work. And I thought at the time that she was right, but actually she was wrong. Because you can find meaning and purpose in your work. And Baruch Hashem, I literally day in and day out am blessed to work with people and to be part of an organization that has a tremendous sense of purpose and meaning. And therefore my life, my day-to-day work has tremendous meaning. I have obviously also found a lot of meaning in family, in community, and in relationships, but I do also find a great deal of meaning in my work. So this story tonight is really about my own personal journey in that regard. And 10 years later, from those incidents that I've just described, I decided to reinvent myself as a social entrepreneur. And so I went online and I wanted to look at 40-somethings that were doing amazing stuff. But unfortunately, it was only Forbes' 30 under 30 category, and I missed that. And these were 30 under 30s that were doing absolutely amazing things. I don't know if you can see this picture, if it comes out. Well, we have to switch off the light just to get a sense of Jason Aramburu, who's only 27 years old, and who is the founder of an organization called Rechar, and that's an amazingly with it name. And he uses biochar, I have no idea what that is, to help farmers in East Africa fight climate change and grow more food. It's made from crop and animal waste, and for just a $60 investment, the farmer saves $200 annually, notwithstanding all the other benefits that come to the farm and through environmental sustainability as well. So that's a hell of a return on investment, $60 for $200. And this is Jason Aramburu doing this at 27 years old. I'm not sure what I was doing at 27 years old, but I wasn't changing the world like this. I was just trying to rack up more and more money. Fortunately, there were some 40-somethings on the internet as well. I thought if she can look that good at 40-something, then I must be able to do some good at 40-something as well. So hence my move into social entrepreneurship. Now I want to just kind of get into the idea of entrepreneurship versus social entrepreneurship, and just to draw some commonalities and some distinctions between the two ideas. So an entrepreneur sees a gap in the market, an unmet want. People want something out there that's not being met. They are primarily driven by a profit motive in producing a product or service to meet that unmet want. They then develop their vision around that for their organization or company that they want to build. They raise capital from shareholders, and they then go about branding and building their organization. That's the typical entrepreneurial model of starting up a business. The social entrepreneur is a little bit different in terms of their starting point, because the social entrepreneur starts with a certain sense of idealism, vision or values that drives them to look in society and see where there are gaps and unmet needs that are not being serviced, as opposed to wants that are not being serviced, real needs that are not being serviced, and is therefore driven by an altruistic motive to meet those needs in keeping with their idealism, vision, and values. Now that doesn't mean that they're not necessarily profit-oriented as well. They may be profit-oriented, and that's why they are still entrepreneurs. They may or may not be profit-motive. But profit is not the primary driver of their motivation. And it's an interesting question, because if you were to interview a whole group of social entrepreneurs, to unpack what is the primary motivator. With our second child, we had a surrogate carry for us because my wife couldn't carry our second child. And what was interesting is that money was a motive for the surrogate. But when we worked with the psychologist to identify and ensure that we had the right surrogate, the psychologist explained money is a motive, but it's never the primary motive. for the salary. Okay, so you can have this confused motive as well, and the question is which is primary, which is secondary. Okay. There's also often a product or a service. You also need funding. That's not necessarily from shareholders. It may be broader stakeholders, donors, or in the case of a profit model, shareholders as well. And then the brand and build exercise begins as well. Okay. So that's just some interesting thoughts, and maybe you can reflect yourselves on how you understand the term social entrepreneurship and the differences and distinctions between the traditional entrepreneurial model and the social entrepreneurial model. What's amazing today is that more and more businesses are discovering the power of social entrepreneurship to be successful. And I think we're living in the age of social entrepreneurship. And even traditional businesses are trying to reinvent themselves as social entrepreneurship models. Okay, a guy, Simon Sinek, you may have seen some of his stuff online. If you search him on YouTube, you'll see some great little TED Talks and videos that he's given. He talks about the why, the how, and the what. And he says that business, we've spoken a lot tonight about switching things around. That traditional businesses often start with the what, okay, and then the how, and then they try and discover what is the why are they doing. I remember when I was at Old Mutual, sitting with my team and saying, well, what's the why? I guess this was the altruistic Lawrence coming out. Why do we do what we do? And they looked at me like very strange and said, to make more money. Okay, that's why, whereas with SACAP, it's why do we do it? It was like this whole conversation with this new team. It was amazing. Okay, so this fits very much with the social entrepreneurial model, because social entrepreneurs begin with the why. Naturally, they begin with the why, and then they get into the how, and then they get into the what. Okay, so let's just have a look at some of those, the why, how, and what in the context of SACAP. Okay, so the why SACAP exists is because, I spoke about this a little bit earlier when I introduced and welcomed the evening, but we exist because we have a vision of an empowered society, of people in healthy relationship with themselves, their families, the community, and broader society. But we are painfully aware, as I think everybody in this audience is tonight, that the reality of our society is very, very different from that. We live with massive trauma and dislocation, and massive untapped potential as well. It's not only about trauma and dislocation, it's also the enormous potential that exists in our society that's not being tapped into. And therefore, we are motivated by a sense of purpose in training up skilled and knowledgeable and ethical practitioners to go out there and make a difference. That's why SACAP exists. That's why Mark Feitelberg, who started the college 20 years ago, started it, because of this. And this still remains very much our starting point before we get into discussing anything business-oriented. Okay. The how of what we do is really our person-centered approach. Small classes, interactive learning, skills-based. We spoke earlier about, learning by doing, and that's very much SACAP's model of education. Learning by doing, giving our assignments are all practical. We place our students in work-integrated learning before they qualify. It's all very much person-centered and focused on application of skills. That's how we do it in what we call the SACAP diamond. Okay, and there's just a few points around what we mean by our SACAP diamond. And the what comes later. Right? The what is the after. What we are is an academic institution. We're an accredited private higher education provider. We're a for-profit business in the counseling, psychology, and coaching space, and we provide a range of vocational, academic, and professional offerings at the moment from NQF5 all the way up to NQF8. And just for those that don't know the National Qualifications Framework model, 5 is immediately post-matric, 6 is a diploma level, 7 is a degree, 8 is postgraduate, 9 would be a master's, 10 would be a PhD. So we go all the way up to postgraduate at the moment. And we're a national player with campuses in Joburg and Cape Town. We're looking to open a campus in Pretoria by the end of this year, and we also have online students studying with us. So that's the what of SACAP, and really a nice description of that, borrowing a little bit from the Audi rings or the Olympic Games, which is going to be later this year. Academic, diamond, and social impact. That kind of explains a little bit of our model, and just unpacking in that model some of the key points that I've already raised this evening. So really what our core strategy is scaling up for social impact. And that's what we've been doing for the last 5 years. We've been on a very, very exciting journey. We started out 5 years ago with 200 students. We're now at over 1,000 students nationally. We've expanded our range of programs. And we're growing what we do. And we're doing that because we want to have a broader social impact reach in the organization. Now, what about the profit motive? Okay. It's all well and good. You like the story, social entrepreneurship, but let's get to the crux. What about that profit motive? Okay. So now, I'm not going to say that the profit motive is the only model, or that a for-profit business is the only model in social entrepreneurship. I think there are, and we have to acknowledge it. In fact, we work with many non-profit organizations very, very successfully. We've heard tonight about the Talisman Foundation, we've heard about Africa Tikkun, and so on and so on. Those are very, very successful models, which are non-profit based. And the non-profit model has various advantages. Firstly, it resolves actual or perceived conflicts of interest. It's a much purer form of altruism. You don't have to keep answering the question of, but what about the profit? And why are you doing this? And what's primary? Is it your altruism or is it your profit motive? It's pure. There's no questions asked. It's much easier to get donor funding to achieve your goals in a non-profit model. You can rely on volunteers, people who don't get paid, so potentially you've got a lower cost base from that perspective and a lower cost of capital. And it often opens doors for you which aren't easy to open being a for-profit organization. But it also has disadvantages. And in fact, some of those came up in the first talk this evening on Africa Tikkun. Some of the inefficiencies, the tension that often exists in a non-profit environment between professional staff and volunteer staff, the lack of accountability. It's often very, very difficult to hold volunteers accountable. And that creates a culture of non-accountability, which often spills over even into the professional staff environment. And as many of those that have worked in a non-profit environment, and I work in the community with a lot of non-profits, sustainability is always on the agenda. Can we afford? How are we going to cover our budget? How much money can we raise? Can we see out the next year? Which often leads to quite short-term thinking and a lack of long-range planning, because you never know beyond the next 6 months whether you can actually cover your costs. And the for-profit model really addresses, I'll be one moment. For-profit model really addresses these shortcomings. I failed to meet my 15 million accountability. Access to capital, focus on return on that capital to ensure that you're actually using the capital efficiently, which creates a culture of accountability and aligns incentives within the organization. Final slide. So, how successful have I been at rebranding myself as a social entrepreneur? So I went into my LinkedIn profile. This is a little bit old. It's actually improved. I think I now have some scores for social entrepreneurship. But as much as I try to redefine myself, my old colleagues, and even some of my new colleagues, kept rating me for investments, business strategy, private equity, corporate finance. No one was giving me any scores for social entrepreneurship until I gave this talk in Cape Town last year, and I started to get some text from the sympathetic audience. Anyway, that's me. Probably 16 or 17. That's my apologies.